Marvel Snap just dropped their craziest card ever. Rama Tut is a 4/5 with an on-reveal ability that uses 3 on-reveals from before Rama Tut's time. But is this guy any good? And if he is, what are the best decks to play him in? Let's take a look at Rama Tut, what he does, and how to win with him in Marvel Snap. First things first, what does before Rama Tut's time even mean? Thanks to intrepid infographic maker EK August, we know that Rama Tut can pull from a pool of 108 cards, all of which are currently on the screen. These cards can have either beneficial or non-beneficial effects. In a fun twist, according to the data miners, Rama Tut had 3 cards at the end of its pool that look like they were added in because everything else is in alphabetical order except these cards. Those cards are Destroyer, MODOK, and Viper. In other words, it kind of looks like they took all of the bad hits out of Rama Tut's pool and then thought about it for a little bit and put them back in. So we've established that what he will do is 3 things that are, with a few major exceptions, usually going to be beneficial to you. But are they going to be beneficial the right way? One of the things that really sticks out when you play Rama Tut is, oh, wow, a lot of these cards are just sort of adding cards to my hand. He's not literally Nick Fury, but he is pretty Nick Fury adjacent some of the time when you have things like Agent 13, Cable, Mirage, all of these cards that are just going to be like, oh, okay, draw some cards effectively, but not really in necessarily the way every deck wants. The other thing that sticks out when you play Rama Tut is that if you duplicate his on reveal on a Wong, you get doubled effects on all of the things that he does, and then also a second copy of his effect that is then individually, each of the individual constituent parts of it are doubled. In other words, you are probably going to end up with something that is meaningfully beneficial to you when you Wong a Rama Tut. Those are the main 2 takeaways. Mostly, he is generically beneficial, but not specific enough that you're going to want to run him in a deck that is doing a specific thing. But if you are able to Wong him, you can double up on your double up effectively, and typically when you get 12 procs of Rama Tut, something good is probably going to happen on aggregate that is going to be powerful enough to win you the game. This is, of course, not guaranteed. He is, Marvel Snap's Yogg Saron. But I think it's important to highlight just how crucial I feel Wong packages are to wanting to play this guy in anything other than Arishem. Speaking of Arishem, it's pretty clear to me that the place that this guy will actually see play in the future is most likely to be Arishem if it's going to be anywhere. Rama Tut is a card that is exceptionally unique in terms of power output, in the sense that there's a lot of it, but it's not very guaranteed. He's almost like if a card was Arishem, but only 1 card. He's doing kind of the same thing. I'm going to be above rate a lot of the time, but I'm going to be above rate in ways that you might not necessarily be able to capitalize on. In much the same way that Arishem is above the curve with all of the extra energy that it generates, but is counterbalanced by the fact that it's just simply not going to be consistent, that is the very same curve that Rama Tut exists on. The reason he goes in Arishem is because you can play him on turn 3, and he's just a really above-rate 4-drop a lot of the time. Arishem is already a deck that is very much not trying to do a specific thing. Arishem is a deck that does something that is generally similar game to game, but each of the specific things you do are going to be different. You are going to be playing above curve every game. You are probably going to be trying to play a relevant tech card. You are going to lose to people that are going to be able to combo over the top of you or use mid-range scalers to get taller than you, and you are going to probably use some randomly generated cards in order to make that happen. This means that Rama Tut fits in what Arishem is doing because he is just an intensification of the thing you're already doing. I'm going to lean into some RNG and get a benefit from it that is almost certainly going to be above the curve, with the potential downside of instantly losing me the game. In much the same way that you can instantly lose the game in Arishem by just tricking your entire hand off of the random generation that this card is so prone to be doing. Arishem is also a deck that actually kind of likes a lot of the card gen that Rama Tut does. When you play this guy, you really notice, like, wow, there's a lot of card generation going on here, whether it's Bastion or like any of the, and there are just a shocking amount of cards whose on reveals amount to get another card that are in Rama Tut's pool. And those are typically bad in a non-Arishem deck because, again, a non-Arishem deck is often trying to do something specific, right? It's trying to do a thing that is like, oh, I would like to show allow. Oh, I would like to Star-Lord. Oh, I would like to, and it's like a very specific game plan, right? And so you don't really get these extra resources and say, that's awesome, I love this. Even in a deck that wants cards in hand, like a V-hand or whatever, it wants specific cards in hand. It would much rather play a Moon Girl than a Rama Tut, right? But Arishem is a deck that just needs resources and it needs power. If you can get anything decent, it might be better than the things Arishem is putting into your hand. And that is one of the upsides that Rama Tut has in the shell. I think that also playing him on 3 gives you just a way, way, way better sense of whether this guy is going to be like a meaningful thing. It's hard to explain what I'm about to say next because I don't really feel like I fully understand it, but the gap between playing something that is like game-winning upside but not nearly guaranteed on 3 versus on 4 is huge. It is huge. It is so much less of a commitment to do it that early because your Rama Tut is being contrasted against their Gladiator or Copycat, and it's a lot easier for him to come out ahead in that comparison than it is when he's being contrasted against the stuff at 4, which is actually like linchpin game winners. In an ongoing deck, you're playing Moonstone on 4, you're playing Captain America on 3, right? Like, it's a lot easier for him to look better than those things than it is for him to look better than Doom 2099, right? Like, turn 4 is where people's game plans start really showing up and linchpin cards start hitting the board. And he doesn't compare well to those linchpin cards, but he does compare well to those support cards. And that is what allows Arishem to succeed with him in it because you're just naturally above the curve. You're compounding what Rama Tut does with what Arishem does. And I do think that if this guy's ever going to see play, it's going to be either in a deck like this or in a deck that has a Wong package in it. Okay, look, please don't throw stones at me for putting him in a Show Allow deck and doing well with him. Yes, I put him in a Show Allow deck. Yes, it did well. He was not a major part of this, but he did do some pretty compelling stuff in the sense that when you had a deck like this that is sort of built to optimize him, you get to do a lot of non-Show Lao power. And what I mean by that is very often I would just play on 3 a Silver Surfer First Steps and on 4 a Rama Tut and just be like, that's a lot of stuff and it'll probably be enough to force my opponent out of the game. It felt a lot better than I thought it would, right? Like, that is a very meaningful thing. Obviously, the Wong thing is particularly powerful. Being able to Wong this guy is a big, big buff to that whole deal. And this kind of package is something that Cougar was messing around with. If you recall, on 8 Cubes, we discussed this. This deck is a deck that I actually came away shockingly impressed with, but I'll go through the reasons why, and they only sort of tangentially relate to Rama Tut. Reason number 1 is I came away from playing this deck, which I had a 70% win rate with in High Infinite, and honestly might end up doing a longer video about because of what I'm about to say. I was really impressed with Pixie Mobius in the shell. I was just actually genuinely, I came away thinking Pixie Mobius in the Show Lao shell legitimately feels like I'm raising the ceiling in ways that are confusing to people, in ways that will maybe keep them in the game a little bit longer, in ways that like genuinely feel like they help the cube equity of this deck. I was surprised to find that. Like, I think that that was number 1, the thing that really got me. The second thing that really got me was Wong Rama Tut is actually just good. Like, basically every time I did that, and granted, Pixie Mobius supports this, right? You do your Pixie Mobius stuff, maybe you get a Surge down there, you're getting really cheap guys basically 100% of the time, and it allows you to do crazy stuff like Wong a Rama Tut on the final turn of the game or something like that. Like, you get a lot of those things in there, right? This is not a deck that has to commit to, like, I'm going to actually play Wong and get Cosmoed. Sometimes you can do a final turn Wong Shoulao. I've done that, right? Like, that dynamism, I think, is particularly interesting here. This is a deck that really wants specifically Shoulao and maybe has the ability to get some other stuff in there as additional win cons. I genuinely am not sure what a better Wong win con would be. And I know that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, right? But the only other thing I could think of was Infinity Ultron, which is a card Cougar was running in here. And it's like, I would like to be able to play because I also want to be able to do, like, you know, Yellowstone Rama Tut off the Infinity Ultron. That sounds like a really fun turn 6. But I actually am sort of like, if I want like Wong target number 2, Rama Tut's actually just kind of great at that. I don't know that he'll stick around. I do think that, like, you know, this is a deck that's doing pretty specific things. I want to be doing those specific things as much as I can. So obviously it's a little bit of a downgrade when there's a card in my deck that has a chance to blow up my board. I also will say the entire time I played this deck, I did not pull a Destroyer, a MODOK, or a Viper off of Rama Tut once, and I was Wonging him. He's not particularly the reason this deck works, but I do kind of wonder if there's, like, another thing that scales with Wong the way he does, right? Because most things don't scale with Wong like this. Most things you scale with Wong in like a duplicative manner, right? You play a Wong and then you get 2 on reveals out of it. With him, he scales up to like from 3 on reveals to effectively 12 on reveals, right? You get that X4 that, like, I don't think there's any other card that actually does that. Like, it's a very interesting dynamic where it's like, I don't really think he's responsible for a lot of the success here, but I also don't really know what other card would complement the Wong as well as he does. It's very interesting. Last up, I've seen a lot of people just playing like base Nomura, Rama Tut, Wong type things, and I want to be clear, I don't think this is a wrong thing to do. I just think that it's likely that you are making your Nomura deck worse when you do this. When we talk about like decks that really want to do specific things, you can do a billion Rama Tuts, but there is going to be a point at which the output that is guaranteed on the Nomura is going to exceed what you're going to get off of a Rama Tut going completely berserk. I respect doing this. I just think that genuinely Nomura, a little bit of an underrated archetype already. That said, the Wong interaction with Rama Tut is real. Like I talked about, like the fact that he goes effectively X4 with a Wong instead of just X2 is meaningful to this card's profile. It does give you these like haymaker shots. People talk about Rama Tut like he's Yogg Saron, right? I don't think Rama Tut is Yogg Saron. I think Wong Rama Tut is Yogg Saron. And that's the thing I really want to get at here. Like, if you're able to do that, that's where you actually get into the, like, I've got 90 power here for no reason. It just happened. Or I blew up my entire board. That's where you actually start accessing the Yogg Saron-ness of this card. When you get to, like, that 6 on reveals, all of them are doubled kind of stage. That's where you actually get to, like, the game-winning nature of a Yogg Saron, where I think Rama Tut on his own a lot of the time is not getting to that ceiling. So that's the big thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to like how this card is going to be played. I think it's very much going to be, you are going to see him in Wong decks because of that X4, and you are going to see him in Arishem decks because of that +1 energy. And outside of that, I'm not particularly convinced he does a lot of stuff, but he is pretty undeniably one of the coolest cards they've ever made. So, what's the verdict on Rama Tut? I think it is a little bit unlikely that he's ever going to be a major player in the metagame. The most likely place for him to show up for me were the order we showed those decks in. Number 1, I think he's likely to show up in Arishem, or at least maybe let's call it a 50% chance to be a card that you see fairly often in those decks. Next up is a Wong deck that is using energy cheat in some way to not be super vulnerable to Cosmo. We had the Pixie Mobius, for example. That kind of shell does feel like a meaningful place to put that effective X4 for Rama Tut. Next up is a Wong deck that is not doing that. A straightforward Wong deck that is just doing Nomura, White Tiger things. I think it is likely he represents a downgrade there, although he does do some very cool stuff. I think largely that is my understanding of this card at this time. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. Please remember to like and subscribe. Leave a comment if you enjoyed the video. And as always, have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you in the next one.